A sharecropper is someone who would farm land that belonged to a landowner. The sharecropping family would plow, plant, weed, and harvest the land. However, they would only keep a small share of the crop, while the landowner would get the rest. Following the Civil War, plantation owners were unable to farm their land. They did not have slaves or money to pay a free labor force, so sharecropping developed as a system that could benefit plantation owners and former slaves. Landowners would have access to a large labor force, and the newly freed slaves were looking for work. The workers could negotiate a place to work, and if they made enough money, they could purchase land or buy farm equipment. Sharecropping agreements typically favored the landowner. In many cases, at the end of a planting season, a worker might be paid only 1/3 of the crop that he or she produced. If a sharecropper could contribute something else other than labor, like a mule for example, he or she might receive a slightly larger portion of the crop. Land was not the only thing sharecroppers needed from landowners. Landowners would sell fertilizer, seed, clothing, shoes, and food from the farm store to the sharecropper. Sharecroppers rarely had cash, so they were extended credit to make purchases. After the crop was harvested in the fall, the sharecroppers received shares of the crop. With the cash they received, the sharecroppers had to pay back the debt accumulated during the planting season. For most sharecroppers, making money and paying off debts were not the only factors that mattered. A sharecropper had to decide whether or not to stay on a certain farm from one year to the next. In many cases, a major factor was how much the landowner attempted to control the sharecropper's non-farm life. Many African American people sought the opportunity to attend school and church. Some landowners granted blacks this right, while some did not. Sharecropping ended in the mid-20th century, largely because workers left the fields for southern and northern cities. Blacks left the South in search of better jobs, and landowners sought new technologies to make cotton growing practical and less expensive, with fewer people in the fields. Tractors and other technological advances also allowed landowners to increase their yields with fewer workers. Prior to these developments, from the 1870s through the 1940s, sharecropping was a labor system that kept poor blacks and whites working in agriculture. Sharecropping refers to a time in American history when someone would plow, plant, weed, and harvest the land, but only be able to keep a small share of the crop. They would farm land that they did not own, with the landowner keeping the bulk of the crop and its resulting profits. The tradition of sharecropping followed the Civil War and the abolishment of slavery. Landowners needed their land farmed, but did not have the skills. Former slaves had the skills, but did not have any land. Agreements were made between the two groups of people that favored the landowners and kept poor blacks working in agriculture with little opportunity to earn the money needed to buy land of their own.